Hopefully we can get the okay, cool. I do see Frank and Alyssa on camera, so that's fantastic. And we will get started. Fantastic. So thank you all for being here all day. I want to welcome you to the Capstone session, the final fireside chat, traditionally here at the Space Education Summit. I do want to take just a moment to thank our partners. So I am going to share my screen and put up our slides. There we go. Can you guys see that?
Yep.
All right, right on. So thank you once again for being here for the final capstone session for the Space Education Summit. I do want to take a minute to thank our partners, including Earthscape VR and Aries Learning, the Aldrin Family Foundation, who provided a few speakers today, Ignited Thinkers, Club for the Future from Blue Origin also provided a speaker day. Space Foundation spoke today. Celestial Citizen for their help promoting this, and the Human Space Program has been a part of it from the very beginning. Anahita, we all got to say a minute about our our organization this morning, and you weren't here, Anahita, being one of our co-founders and co-organizers. Do you want to say a minute about Earthscape VR before we move on?
I'll take a quick minute then to do that. So hi, I'm Anahita. I'm a psychologist. I'm one of the co-founders of Earthscape VR. We found the company with my colleague, Charlie Perring. We create immersive experiences based largely on the overview effect, as well as other nature-based extraordinary experiences. We couple in some music, some meditation, some pulses and lights, all based on the science of science and psychology. And we then convert those programs into workshops and therapies and things like that sort of look to improve something within society. So whether it's mental health or sustainability, and we're currently researching all of our programs, and we have two researchers, PhD researchers, Ruben and Saba, who have used our programs here today to research them, and we have a bunch of other partnerships as well that are underway. So if you want to check us out, go to earthscapevr.com. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Anita. And thanks to all our partners for everything you've done to help make this volunteer event happen for the fourth time. So super excited to have had everybody participating today too that's been a part of this. So once again, just to reiterate our participant norms, we definitely want everybody participating in the text chat. And I see a few that have shown up since I started sharing my screen. And do use the raise hand feature. We're going to have a Q&A toward the end of the fireside chat, and it has in the past been a really rich discussion, so do participate. And you may very well be asked to unmute or share your screen if you've got something to share during the chat, so feel free to do that when the opportunity arises. If you do need help, just drop a message in the chat. You can also ping Ron, who is our co-host and actual host on Zoom. Hopefully you were here to see Ron speak on the astronaut panel this morning. If not, definitely recommend you go back and see the recording when we share it. But Ron is your helpline for the afternoon if you need the help, or just share in the chat and one of us will be able to jump in and help. That being said, I do want to introduce our guest speakers for the capstone conversation. The first is Alyssa Carson, who you may also know by her call sign Blueberry. She's a student with the goal of becoming an astronaut and being selected for future human spaceflight to Mars. And she's had this in her sights since she was like 3 years old. So her story is a unique and rich one. She enrolled at Florida Institute of Technology to study astrobiology and is continuing her education now with a PhD in space and planetary science at the University of Arkansas. She has worked with NATO. She's a member of the Explorers Club, the youngest full member ever accepted. So we are thrilled to have her paired up today with Frank White, the author of The Overview Effect. And we shared a little bit of Frank's work that has spanned decades. We didn't talk this morning so much about his other books, but not only the author of The Overview Effect, but the Cosma hypothesis expands his ideas far into the future, all the way to the suggestion that perhaps if humanity is alone in the universe, we might be the universe's way of knowing itself, and there's something of a moral imperative to explore then. Frank is the founder of the Human Space Program, and he's been a part of this event from the beginning too, often gracing us for the final closing fireside chat. So we have a panelist in her 20s and a panelist in his 80s, and I think it is going to be a spectacular juxtaposition to hear some of their answers to our questions. So to kick them off, I'm afraid I have to check my notes, which I had plugged in before the session. Give me just a second. Here we go. Gitika and I have a few questions again, as we did this morning, and then we will open it up to everyone. So I actually want to start with a question that I love asking, and this is, what was your trajectory into space? Obviously, neither of you have been to space yet, but both of your lives have been dedicated to it for years. So what is the trajectory that brought you here? And was there anyone in particular that gave you a gravity assist, perhaps an educator or a mentor? I'm going to stop sharing so that we can see Alyssa and Frank full screen, and let you guys go ahead and respond. Who would like to kick us off?
Alyssa, go ahead, please.
Sure, I'll go ahead and start it. Thank you guys so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. Yeah, I'm really just talk about space. So yeah, space obviously has been a huge part of my life and always been a passion and a huge interest. Mainly what kick-started my interest in space. I mean, I have always been fascinated ever since I was a little girl. No one in my family has any sort of space or science experience or careers or absolutely anything similar at all, to be honest. So I was definitely like the odd one out with my big interest in space and STEM. But yeah, looking back, kind of my best guess as to where I first heard about space was actually an episode of the Backyardigans, which was this cartoon that used to be on Nickelodeon. But really, my dad remembers me asking questions about space and what was going on, but we didn't really know where I had even heard the word space or Mars before. And I actually had a poster for the Backyardigans Mission to Mars episode in my room. And so that is currently our guess as to where it even came from, because we can't think of anywhere else I would have started hearing about space, especially that early. It wasn't something that had been like talked about in school yet. Yeah, and it just piqued my interest. I continued to ask for books and videos and posters and just more and more information as I got older. And yeah, that passion never went away. Still now 22 and still just as interested in space and wanting to learn more. So yeah, that just kind of interest has stuck with me. And the more I learned about space, the more I just wanted to contribute to the space industry in some way.
Well, as a education technologist, I love hearing that it was instructional television that may have planted that seed, because it does make a difference. And knowing a little bit of your story, there's also somebody who's given you a big gravity assist, and I wonder if you could talk about that too.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of gravity assist, I think there's been so many people. My dad was a huge supporter and, a huge help throughout my life and just being supportive of my interests and passions in space. I mean, when I was younger, he came with me to space camp and rode all the crazy things with me, just to kind of support me in that sense. Another, I think, gravity assist was astronaut Sandra Magnus. So she was a part of the shuttle program, and I got to meet her when I was only 9, and she was just so pivotal in showing me that you can have a dream when you're younger and then eventually grow up and succeed at it. And she was living proof in front of me that it could happen. And so she was just a huge inspiration. And yeah, just as I met more people in the space industry, I think they were all just big boosts to wanting to also be a part of it.
I love it. Just that kind of support from everybody, from your dad to your role models, is definitely tells an important story. Well, let's throw this one over to Frank to kick us off, and then Gitika's got the next couple of questions.
Yeah, well, I think many of you know I'm from Mississippi, and so my first cousin and I grew up together, and she tells me that one day we were sitting in the parking lot of Piggly Wiggly grocery store, I don't know if it was really Piggly Wiggly, but it probably was. And anyway, she said in her inimitable accent, well, we were sitting there, we were about 5 years old, and, you turned to me and you said, Ann, I hope you know we can't stay on planet Earth forever. We're going to have to leave and go to other planets. Planets don't last forever. Did you know that? Well, that's a great story. A lot of you have heard it before. I do not remember it, to be honest, but I can't help telling the story because I really think it's in my DNA, kind of like Alyssa, always wanting to be involved. But as far as what really got me going and the gravity assist was my mother gave me a little book called Stars when I was 10 years old. And she said casually, I think you might like this. The way parents are, they're always looking for something. It blew my mind. I just thought, oh my gosh, you mean there's stars, globular clusters, galaxies, planets? I don't know why I hadn't really kind of seen that glorious cosmos, but it made me want to be an astronomer. And then I started reading science fiction. And then Sputnik happened. And like a lot of people my age, I started trying to build rockets in the front yard. And that ended, I think I set the yard on fire at some point, or my parents were pretty convinced I was going to. And Werner von Braun was over in Alabama, not very far from me. So I wrote to Werner. I said, how do I become a rocket scientist? And I also wanted pictures of rocket scientists because I wanted to take them to high school and say, rocket scientists are not weird. They're just like us. And anyway, he wrote back and said, Dear Frank, you should study math, science, calculus, chemistry, physics, astrophysics. It went on and on. Those were not my favorite subjects. So I did not become a rocket scientist. And this is a point I've been wanting to make. I admire Alyssa for her clarity of her vision. This is what I want to do. I want to go to Mars. Am I right? You want to be the first person to go? That's how I understand it. But my path has been much more unpredictable. And so to make a long story short, I searched for many years, how do I get into the space industry and the space movement if I'm not interested or competent at math, science, physics, etc. And even, I did okay in those subjects. They just weren't my favorites. And so even today, if you look at the NASA application, it's pretty heavily technical. So what really got me on this trajectory, and I can say more later, but what led to the overview effect was Gerard K. O'Neill. And O'Neill, founded the Space Studies Institute, and he was not interested in space missions. There you go. He was interested in space migration. How do we move industry and people off of planet Earth to benefit planet Earth? How can we build habitats out there? And he welcomed everybody, astronauts, engineers. I met Soviet cosmonauts there, but also poets and philosophers. And O'Neill just had a vision that is still quite fresh 50 some odd years later. And that is where I got started. And I'll stop there, but I could say too, no O'Neill, no overview effect. And we can talk about that later, because that experience led me to write the book eventually. And then from there, I think so many of you know me, you know what happened after that, but we can go back to it if you like, Mark.
Sure thing. No, I love that your story spans everything from Werner von Braun up to Jerry O'Neill to your work today. It's pretty fantastic to hear that perspective. I'm actually going to hand it over to Gitika for the next couple of questions here.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. I mean, first, I just have to say both the panelists are such incredibly inspiring individuals in both of their respective paths. And to hear, with Alyssa being sparked by a television show, which I think a lot of students can relate with like watching The Martian or like Star Wars or Star Trek, and Frank with the rocketry and seeing the rockets fly up. I think it's an experience so many of us can relate with, which is really great to hear. And as Mark was introducing, both of you have had such incredible careers so far. And when you look at someone on LinkedIn or look at their resume and their accomplishments, it seems like, oh, they've achieved so much. I don't know if I can, get to that position. They probably had it easy, but I'm sure both of you have had obstacles you must have had to overcome, or certain things you had to overcome in your life. So my next question for you is, did you face any obstacles? And if so, how were you able to overcome them? And anyone can take this. Anyone can start off.
Sure. Yeah, sure. I'll jump in here. Yeah, I would definitely say, obstacle wise, I mean, there was always trying to figure things out. I mean, when I was first getting interested in space, I mean, there was some communication about space, and there were a few space camps or things to go to. But, when I was younger, I was very interested in wanting to get involved in real research and getting involved in the space industry directly. So a lot of the times, honestly, I was really fighting my age. I was always trying to do all sorts of different things and really get involved. I wanted to take everything about the space industry very seriously. And obviously, being a kid, a lot of people would be like, oh, that's cute. Like, that's cute that you like space, but like not necessarily realize how serious I would want to take it. And so I think a lot of it was, growing up, trying to be taken seriously with, my goals and aspirations that felt really big to me. And yeah, really just get involved and participate in a really big way. I mean, I think I was luckily eventually able to find that. I started working with IIAS, which is a citizen science research organization. And I think that was really huge, just being able to participate in real research. And I was able to start that when I was 15. And they took a chance on letting me start and being involved in their program. Everyone else was, adults. But I'm very grateful that they kind of took that chance on me and was able to see that passion and, give me that opportunity. And so, yeah, I think that was a huge thing. Obviously, my age as well, I still had to go to school and be a normal kid as well. So, yeah, just the whole time management side of it as well, trying to balance going to school, being a student, while also having the aspiration of wanting to build a resume and do these really cool things that I thought would be, really beneficial for a future career. So yeah, just kind of that time management and sticking on top of it. And, even when it is, wanting to work in the space industry, as Frank mentioned, when you look at NASA's list, I mean, the STEM objectives are there. And so I always knew that education was equally as important as all of these really cool opportunities. And so it was always kind of picking and choosing those moments, trying to decide which would be more important, but also realizing at the core, I mean, I had to get through school. I had to focus on that as well. And so I think just kind of keeping that time and balance appropriate.
Yeah, I think that's a lot students can relate with. I'm sure Frank has a lot to add to that.
Yeah, I think it's important what you said, that you look at a LinkedIn resume and you say, oh, obviously this person is incredibly talented and they had a lot of benefits and privilege, and that's why they have this resume. Usually that's not the case. I've certainly found it out interviewing astronauts. Many of them had to overcome a lot of obstacles to become who they are today. And that certainly is the case with me, in the sense that just quickly going back to what I was talking about before, when I was engaged with Gerard K. O'Neill, I began to obsess about living in outer space. and getting up every morning and there's the earth in the sky. What would that be like? What would it be like? And so one day I was flying across country, not anything to do with the Space Studies Institute, looking out the window, and I had an epiphany. Oh, they would have an overview of the earth. They would see it as a whole system. That would be profound. They would experience the overview effect. And my life changed on that flight. When I got back to Earth, I called NASA Public Affairs and I said, I have to interview all the astronauts right now. There were about 200 of them at the time. He thought that was rather funny. And he said, I think if you can come to Houston, I might be able to set up interviews with 2 astronauts. And then he said, why don't you interview retired astronauts, which I hadn't thought of. And that's what started it. So again, no O'Neill, no overview effect, right? So it was my engagement with Jerry O'Neill's vision that led to my vision around the overview effect. And when I started interviewing astronauts, I found out it was really different from what I thought, which was it would be ordinary to experience the overview effect. But for astronauts who didn't get up every morning and see the Earth in the sky, it was shocking, amazing, and it caused a cognitive shift. Well, I wrote a book called The Overview Effect, and the first barrier back in 1987 was getting published. And it wasn't easy to get published if you're an unknown person. And again, to make a long story short, I sent a letter to Bantam Books and I sent my marketing plan and what I'd done already. And I got a letter back saying, oh yeah, Alistair's got the original edition. They said, we have standards here at Bantam and your book meets none of them. Sorry. Usually publishers would write back and say, this is a great idea. It's not right for us. But Bantam said, your book meets none of our standards. Anyway, eventually Houghton Mifflin did take the book and they published it. And I thought, that's it. The revolution in consciousness will begin, which is what I wanted to do, was create a revolution in thinking. And somebody didn't get the memo because the book did okay, but not great outside of the space community. And my point is, I really spent 20 years thinking that I had failed. 20 years of thinking I had failed in my goal, in my purpose in life. I wrecked my finances, and I mean wrecked them because I had no plan B. And fortunately, Harvard gave me a job so I could get my finances back in order. But the point of my story is, it wasn't until 2007, around that time, David Beaver started a conference on a one-day conference on the overview effect. And people got up and I started understanding the book had had a big impact, you know? And I didn't know that for all those years. I thought it had been a failure. And going back to what Alyssa said, even though I spent all those years not being as engaged as I wanted to be, I never stopped wanting to be. And somebody told me a story that I'll close with, that Sir Winston Churchill, was invited to give a talk to some young people in a school in England. And he got up and said, never give up. And he sat down. And the headmaster came over and said, Sir Winston, could you say a little bit more? Yes. Okay. So he got up. Never, ever give up. And he sat down. I can't say much more than that. You know, I think both of us, we are separated by many, many years. I want to say to every one of you, never, ever give up on your passion if it's related to this incredible movement that we are part of, which is to help humanity find its destiny among the stars. I mean, every one of you has got something to offer. And I've been blessed. I just want to close by saying I've been blessed as a late bloomer that, you know, because of other people, really, the overview effect is out there. And I've compared it to one of my children. I don't know what it's doing half the time. I don't know what crowd the overview effect is running in. You know, hopefully it's doing good things, but it's way beyond my control at this point as an idea. So I've been blessed to see that happen. And if any of you feel like your goal, your passion is not being met, just never give up.
I love that. Wow. I think that's so powerful in itself. And it just shows your story is just a testament to like persistence and how passion can shine through. I think as a student myself, I'm sure like other students on this call will really, and young adult, really anyone of any age going through anything, hearing that is almost like a sense of confidence. Like, oh, if we just keep pushing, you know, at some point our hard work will pay off, which is very amazing to hear. And, you know, my next question for both Alyssa and you is what would you've already given plenty of advice just now, but what would your advice be for students in general in life, or it could be in regards to pursuing a career in space from your personal experiences? If you could give a piece of advice to your younger self or just students right now in general, what would that advice be?
Yeah, I'll go with this. I mean, kind of speaking and especially speaking to the next generation has definitely become almost like a second passion for mine. Really, the idea of speaking or even being kind of like a science communicator, none of that was ever predicted or expected. I never even thought I would be able to teach people anything about space. I mean, when I was younger, I just thought it was cool and started working towards that. But, you know, it's been so fascinating to kind of make that switch and also being able to teach and share. And, you know, kind of talking about something to that I would want my younger self to know, and also something I love telling kids about, is really the reality of some of these space jobs. And I think it's really important, specifically in the STEM and space industry, because it's so easy for your job to sound so cool, right? You can say, you know, you're studying planets, you're building rockets, you're, you know, doing all of this really cool stuff, and it is. But, you know, I think it's really important that we're also showing kids what this job realistically does look like on a day-to-day basis. Because, you know, when I was younger, I knew I liked space, but actually figuring out what discipline, what area of space I truly wanted to work in was a little bit more challenging, because you really can study so many different things and eventually work in the space industry. And so it was really trying to figure out what was I good at, and then what did that actually work best with, what career did that actually match up with. And, you know, a big thing that I encountered was, you know, I was like, oh, you know I don't necessarily want to be a pilot. You know, maybe I want to do the science. So I started leaning a little bit into astrophysics. But then, you know, I mean, looking back, I'm really glad I didn't do that, because coding and sitting at a computer definitely is not necessarily my strength. But I wouldn't necessarily have known that in the beginning, that it would be very much just data from satellites. I mean, of course, we're not just standing in front of Jupiter and Saturn and learning about them, but, you know, as a kid, it's hard to actually picture what these jobs look like and what these people are doing. And so I think it's really fascinating to be able to kind of share that. And especially, I think nowadays it's a lot more talked about. There's, you know, all sorts of people in the space industry kind of sharing a little bit more of what they do. But yeah, I think that's a big one, just really talking to kids about what is out there, and what those jobs look like. And then again, really teaching them how they're able to mix their different interests. I think a lot of the time, we've already spoken a little bit here, whether it's psychology or so many different disciplines, how they come into play in the space industry. And I think that's so important, just because a lot of kids get really hung up on, oh, I'm not good at math. Oh, I'm not good in science. That line of work just isn't for me. I can't go down that path. And especially as we start looking towards the future of space, as we want to start moving forward in space, everything that we have down here, we're eventually going to need up there, right? So, it really is any sort of job you can really tie into the space industry. So personally, I always love telling kids, who makes the food that goes to space? If an astronaut wants a piece of chocolate cake, can we make a chocolate cake? Can that go to space? Those questions can be just as important as the really scientific ones. And so really keep in mind some of those other interests, because I think when we are finding our true passions, they don't always just lie within one discipline. And so I think sometimes kids can maybe get a bit nervous about how they do like space, but maybe they like something else too. But showing them that they can actually mix those and find a career within that, to where they really are matching everything that they're interested in and actually pursuing a career in that. And I think that's just so cool that space has the opportunity to offer that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I want to just echo what Alyssa said, and I have to repeat my mantra. I have a commitment to say this every time I have an opportunity to speak, and that is, we are in space. We've always been in space. We will always be in space. The Earth is the first space community, and we're in a transition moment here. We're moving from mission to migration. The vision really, I think, is one of large numbers of human beings moving off of planet Earth into the solar ecosystem. And as Alyssa said, whatever we're doing here in the first space community, we got to do in the second and the third. Yeah, Mars is very different from Earth, and you're going to have to adjust to that. But you're going to need, I think Alistair mentioned this earlier, and he's got a book on this topic, incidentally. On Mars, you're going to need psychologists like Anahita, because you're going to have to adjust to a totally alien environment. You're going to need educators like Mark to teach the kids how to be a multi-planet species. And this is probably our biggest barrier in terms of communication right now. Is when I was trying to get into the field, I had an accurate picture of the situation. My skill set wasn't wanted at that time. It was really true. You needed to have the STEM approach. Werner was honest, and I appreciate that. But in this transition moment, I'm doing a lot of work right now with helping space companies get investment. It's a whole new world for me. People working for space startups are communicators. They're financial people. They do what companies do. And so, if you have a skill that a company could use, any company could use, a space company might be able to use it as well. And so we need to help young people understand, and students understand, that let go. If you want to be an astronaut, I'll support you, but let go of that as the only possible way you can be part of this industry, which is growing and changing by the day. It is getting investment, and there are many opportunities for people with different skill sets.
Yeah, I think that was perfectly said. We had a similar conversation earlier in the day with the astronaut panel, where they were mentioning how, I also said this earlier, which is like space you said we're all in space, but like Alyssa was saying, every career that we have, every discipline we have here will be needed up, in the ISS or, in future places if we go to other planets to habitat. And I think it's just so critical to understand that space is so interdisciplinary. So both of you have made such great statements. And I'll pass it back to Mark to ask the final question.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I couldn't have asked for a better way to wrap up this day than what the two of you have already shared. And particularly as a one-time astronautical engineering student who actually wound up teaching literature and philosophy to high school students, I think it's fantastic that it turned out, Werner was a little bit wrong. There was another path, and you made a big impact on a lot of people, a lot of engineers even in the space community by being a philosopher. And I think if we look to fiction for inspiration, we're a lot of us here are big fans of Star Trek and a future where diverse people work together to solve problems and help each other. We want leaders who are not just scientists and engineers, but well-read philosophers as well. So I'm just really warmed to hear those themes in your answers. So I really want to bring it home, I suppose, as an educator, and for the educators who are here and the informal educators and parents. What can educators do, or how might educators best prepare students for humanity's future in space? So what can we do to sort of shepherd that next generation? So you've shared advice for the students and young professionals, but what can the adults in their lives do? And maybe Alyssa, if you don't mind kicking us off again.
Yeah, I think specifically for educators, I think it really is just continuing to show kids the amount of opportunities that are out there. I think that, when I think back to when I was in school or even just learning about different jobs, we hear a lot of doctor, teacher, lawyer, you hear kind of on repeat some of these same jobs. And we've continued to tell the next generation about those same jobs. And, I just find it so interesting that there really are so many more out there that kids just don't know exist. And I mean, it's so true. I mean, even, me, I ended up going to, get my undergrad in astrobiology. I didn't know what astrobiology was for a very long time. And, it definitely was a discipline. No one was talking about being an astrobiologist when I was, in school. But, I think it is important that we continue to share some of these more unique, maybe not quite as niche as astrobiology. I get that it's a little out there. But yeah, I just think, continuing to show kids the amount of opportunity that is out there and not really limiting them in some of that thinking, just because, they may have some crazy ideas, and you know what, there may actually be a job that totally relates to that, and we're just a little unsure. So I think really just, being open and supporting some of those ideas that kids have, whether it's like, I don't know if that exists, but, maybe let's look it up, let's see if it does. And so I think really just that open-mindedness, especially as we're continuing and technology has, continued to grow. And I think it's just crazy because there are jobs that are out there, and, there are going to be jobs for that next generation of students that we don't even know about yet, right? It's all happening so quickly. And so they could really fit into a skill set of something that we just don't know about yet. So I think really it's just continuing to be open-minded, and of course, just trying to support them anyway, trying to teach them things, but in a positive way, not necessarily discounting their dreams, but, showing them the path and the hard work that gets there. Definitely not telling them that's easy, because it will be hard, but, at least showing them that it is possible if they want it, even through all of that hard work. But at the very least, telling them that they can do it if they want to keep going after it.
I love it. Everybody's trajectory is going to be different, but if they stick to Winston Churchill's advice, they will find a way, right? I love it. Frank, it looks like you've got something to add too, and a great perspective, I'm sure.
I'll try to keep it brief because I know you want to do a Q&A as well. First of all, I would say the educators should start by letting go of this idea that it's all STEM. Certainly, if we don't have engineers, we're not going to have spacecraft. So we do need these STEM and STEAM disciplines. Secondly, I think they should read your book, Mark. Mark wrote the book on space education. Alistair has his book on cosmic careers. And I think that educators should educate themselves about what's possible. And then the other thing I would say, I noticed my good friend Rod Pyle is here. Rod and I did a presentation based on a conversation we had where Rod said, I try to explain to people, space hates people. And what he was getting at is it's a really harsh, demanding environment, and you can't survive out there without, you've got to innovate, and you've got to change, and you've got to adjust, and you've got to have special equipment. And I said, yes, but people love space. And it's true. It's a paradox. It's a mystery at the core of what we're doing. But I would say to educators, young people, kids, love space. The whole idea of it, like when I read that book, it's like, oh, there's this open possibility out there. I got to get involved. So I think educators are always looking for ways to get their students to be passionate, to be interested, to be curious. So they should let go of the idea that it's only STEM. And, I'm a history teacher. What can I do? Well, the space movement has an amazing history. I think I could go on, but I'm going to take the Churchillian advice and sit down here and say educators need to educate themselves and then pass it on to the kids. And I think we have some Q&A.
I'm hearing themes of raising awareness, which I think is one of the most important things a teacher can do, especially in a world where we could Google any facts. But also one of the biggest issues schools are facing today is a lack of student engagement and teacher burnout. And I think you can sort of fix both of those by looking to the future. And what kids are excited about, no question about it. Unistellar released a study last year that I love to share, because across hundreds of American families, across demographics, 93% of kids were excited about space. So it's not a boy and girl thing. It's not a young kid and old kid thing. It's not a rich and poor thing. Like, that's a nearly universal number. Kids get excited about this, and it's a great way to engage them in their future. So Frank is right. We've got some time now for Q&A. It's awesome to be able to open this up to the community that have assembled here today, face-to-face for this, well, not face-to-face, but live for this session. Want to give you guys an opportunity to ask some questions of Alyssa and Frank in particular. And in the past, this has turned into a really rich discussion. So feel free to drop questions in the chat or use the raise hand feature if you'd like to ask your question in your own words. But wanna give you guys an opportunity to do that. And Alistair, it's low tech, but I do see your hand raised if you want to kick us off.
Okay. I don't have a hand raise underneath my thing, and I'd like to say something to Frank White. Not a question, but a comment. First of all, I received this book. We've met before in person. When you first presented this book at the John F. Kennedy Center for Performing Arts in Washington, D.C., you seem to remember that. And you autographed this book for me. You were with Charlie Walker. This is yours and Charlie Walker's autograph right there, and your comment.
Wow.
And I just want you to know that I could talk about like what I was saying to you, but that would take up too much time. So I'm just going to say, I took this book home. I read it. I love the introduction to it. And when I went to North Dakota for UND, we talked about the overview effect. We talked about it in Washington afterward when I worked for the National Space Society, and I talked about it at UND for space studies. And this was back in 1988. I had a teacher, Joanne Gabrinowitz. I don't know if you've ever met her, yeah. Oh, so you have. That's good.
Yes.
So she's a very good friend of mine who taught this book, and I reread it. I read it twice. So I think what I'm trying to tell you is your book was never a failure. Your book was a success from day one, from the very beginning. Maybe you didn't realize that it took some time for you to see that. I hope I can say the same about my.
Well,
You, your book was never ever a failure. That's all I wanted to tell you. Never.
well, thank you, Alistair. And that was a great evening at the Kennedy. Well, it was the Kennedy Center for
Center
Performance.
for Performing Arts. Yeah.
For Performing Arts. That was kind of the peak of the book in those days. And I appreciate you saying that. And I think one thing I do want to say is that the only reason I'm here today is because of the astronauts. The past, present, future. We have Ron here today. I was privileged to be there for his flight. But every time somebody gets on top of one of these spacecraft, blasts off, they're really risking their lives. And it really is heroic. And they bring back this sacred knowledge. And I've just been privileged to be the person who's compiled their stories. And I'm very, very thankful for that. So we can't forget. I mean, we've been saying you don't have to be an astronaut, but that is at the heart of the overview effect is the experience of the astronauts. So thank you so much, Alistair, for saying that. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
You know, we had again, I want to invite everybody to ask a question of Alyssa and Frank, but we had a really great participant question this morning that I think it would be great to pose to the two of you, which was essentially if you were to be the first boots on Mars, and I imagine Alyssa's thought of this perhaps a couple of times, but if you were to be the first boots on Mars, and I know Frank wouldn't say no if he was given the opportunity, what would you want your legacy to be if you were the person that was in that position?
Alyssa's got to start. She's thought about it more than I have.
Yeah, I mean, for me, in terms of a legacy, obviously my interest in space definitely started with just kind of the idea of wanting to be an astronaut, just because, I thought space was cool and a cool place to go, and it was so uncharted, and there was so much left to discover. Really, I do think that the more I have learned about the space industry, the more that I've learned about the benefits of the space industry, I really just kind of have this mentality of just wanting to contribute to the space industry in any way that I can. And so I think that really is it. I just want to have made an impact, in whatever way it may be, but have just made an impact in the space industry, and hopefully for the betterment of whatever's next for us within space. But yeah, I think, I've always found what the space industry does to be so inspiring and so unifying in a way, because really when we start talking about, goals within space, we start talking about humanitarian goals and goals for all of us. And so, yeah, really just want to be a part of that. I think it's so huge. And in any way that I fit in and can contribute, that's just what I want to do.
I'm hearing echoes of Jobs as wanting to put a dent in the universe, and if it's not speaking out of turn, I think you already have, and not even having left the planet yet. It's really fantastic to see how many young people and young women you've inspired, and I know you're doing research in a lab right now already, and it's fantastic that you're already on that approach or that trajectory, and love the focus on the humanitarian aspects of it. Frank, do you have given a couple of minutes to think about it, do you have an answer to that?
I got muted. Thanks for the time. I did think of something. So I really believe the greatest speech on space ever given is John F. Kennedy's Rice University speech. We choose to go to the moon. Everybody's heard that speech, I think. And he talked then about the opportunity to start anew as a human species. And we didn't have to take our bad behavior with us. And that that element of choice is so important. And we're facing that choice right now today. And what each one of us does will affect the choices that humanity makes. So if I were the first person on Mars, or one of the first people, I would really want people to look back and say that I was helpful in giving humanity a new start, a new opportunity to evolve and become a better species.
That's awesome. In fact, I think it leads us quite smoothly into a question that Kimberly Washington has shared in the chat, and Kimberly can ask it herself. Kimberly, are you able to unmute?
I am. Hi, Frank. It's good to see you.
You too.
So my question to you is, do you meditate? And do you believe that we can actually reach a level of awareness similar to the overview effect through this practice? Would love your thoughts.
Yeah. The answer is I do meditate, and I have meditated since the 70s. And I recommend it to everyone. And I found that there are quite a few meditators in the space industry. I think it's because people who are interested in exploring outer space are really just as interested in exploring any inner space. In both cases, you're exploring, obviously. One of the big discussions that we've had ever since I wrote the book is, do you have to go into outer space to experience the overview effect? Well, I think that we can answer that by separating the overview from the effect. So I think ideally, the further away you go from the planet, the more you experience the overview. And the ultimate experience is being weightless, being on a suborbital hop, or being in orbit. But the effects are multiple, and many are similar to meditation. And some people have looked at psychedelics. I know Anahita's done some work on the impact of psychedelics on consciousness. And when I wrote the overview effect, I immediately related it to a higher state of awareness. And I said in writing the book, those people living permanently in outer space would understand things spiritual teachers, philosophers, and systems thinkers have been attempting to communicate to us for millennia, really. And if you interview enough astronauts, you'll see that there's a range of interpretations of what they experienced. And Edgar Mitchell told me we all had the same experience, but it was interpreted or processed differently by different astronauts. And so for some in particular, and not all, but for some in particular, I think it comes very close to what you achieve in meditation. So I don't think I have yet done that, but I definitely think that practice has an analog to meditation. And here, just shameless plug. My son happens to be a Zen Roshi, or master, and we're writing a book on Zen and the overview effect. And if you're interested in this question, I think it's going to be a pretty good book exploring the topic.
That's
I
awesome.
look forward to that. Thank you.
And thanks for asking the question, Kimberly. I want to give Alyssa a chance to add to it if she has anything else to say about meditation or higher levels of awareness, or anything that might have brought up. And then we've got one other question to go to after.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only thing I'll just tackle on, I mean, I think I just completely agree. I think, a lot of, higher feelings, I think is something that we almost have to achieve whenever we're looking towards space because there's just so much out there. And really just such a different level of thinking. I think that, when we're here, we're kind of so focused on some of these not necessarily small issues, but we kind of get caught up in our typical day-to-day lives of things that happen here on Earth. And so yeah, I think it's just so important because once you do start talking and emphasizing some of the experiences and differences versus living on Earth and the experiences that you'll have in space and potentially living in space, as far as futures humanity goes. Yeah, I think it is that kind of level of thinking that we will inevitably achieve by, continuing to pursue any future explorations with deeper into space.
Good point. It seems to me that if people are thinking about the future in that way, it makes it a little easier to step out of the pettiness of the present. I think we had one other question from Yara. If you want to unmute and ask your question yourself, Yara.
Hello. So with AI and all the technology there, automation, conflict resolution is something that is uniquely human, excuse me. So, whether you live with people, college roommates, your family, people from different cultures, conflict resolution is a big deal. And I myself, I've been both a homeschooling and public school parent, and I haven't really noticed the curriculum necessarily preparing people for skills in conflict resolution, which is going to be something no matter what robots are there, to be uniquely human is to have conflict and working on teams, especially in space with the harsh environments. You want to be able to mitigate conflict and understand different cultures. So I noticed Alyssa has a background with international relations and impressive education. And Mr. White, you would relate to someone in my international relations organization, who he's former US Navy. He grew up during the Great Depression, so he has fantastic stories to tell me about how things have changed over time. And he used to train foreign service officers, and he always talks about culture, culture, culture. Yet I don't really, like when we talk about diversity in the school system right now, I don't see as much of an emphasis on intercultural communication and things of that nature, which going forward, if we're really going to make a collective difference, as conflicts are bound to keep happening. I was trained by a Chinese interpreter before the pandemic. So I helped low-income Chinese immigrants, and they're such a different, culture, and people kept misunderstanding them. Even they had diagnoses in the school system because people didn't understand the culture. So I wonder if you have any ideas like how we can proactively prepare people for the future in these skills like conflict resolution and understanding other cultures.
Yeah, you kind of spoke a little bit, and I think growing up, I think it's really important to speak about culture. So I went to an international immersion school, my kindergarten through 12th grade. I was there all of my schooling. And it was so unique and so special. Don't ask me why I was in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I have no idea. And that made no sense because it definitely needs to be in big city, I mean, Baton Rouge, in my opinion, is a little bit of a cow town, but I would imagine something like that being in like a more big city to allow, more opportunities for more students. But I mean, it was amazing. We were teaching English, French, Spanish, and Mandarin, and all of our teachers were native to the countries that they were teaching. And yeah, I just thought it was so interesting. We were learning so much more than just the language. We were, having French breakfast for class one day because, that's just, learning how their culture is. And, even not only just teaching those cultures, but even just like hearing from some of my teachers, like, oh yeah, when I was a little girl and my mom would make this, and just actually hearing their personal experiences, I think makes such a huge impact. And yeah, I was just so fortunate and lucky to have had that opportunity. But I do think that having that cultural experience is so important. And I think it's also really important as we move forward in the space industry. I think one goal of the space industry has always been to continue to grow internationally and grow with international relations, and especially for future missions within space. The way I've always thought about it or viewed it is that something as big as sending humans to Mars or figuring out how to get humans to Mars, I don't necessarily think that's a one country problem. I think that, it's going to have to be somewhat of, an international collaboration to be able to get there. And I think sometimes when we think about going to space, we think about kind of losing some of those cultures that we already have here on Earth. And I think, yeah, it's just important that we continue to celebrate those and share them. I think culture is one of those things that's so special to be able to share with one another as humans. And so, yeah, I just hope that that international relationship continues to grow. It's definitely already started, with some of the ideas of going back to the moon and the Artemis program. ESA has a huge leg in the Artemis program. So yeah, I just hope that we continue to have more opportunities of people from different cultures being able to experience space and bring that back to where they're from, and yeah, just continuing to grow that relationship. But yeah, I think that's an excellent point.
So lucky
I
that
would
you
ju-
asked. Oh, sorry, I'll let you take it away, Frank, and then we're at the top of the hour, so at the conclusion of your response, I'll wrap things up.
I'll make it quick. First of all, Alyssa, I've been to Baton Rouge, and you know, I won't comment other than that. But I do know where you come from. I would say two things, Yara. One is one of the reasons that I co-founded the Human Space Program was that after interviewing all the astronauts, it just became clear that this was too big a task for one country, one company. It had to be a global endeavor of humanity. And so that's one of the things that the Human Space Program is working on. The other thing I would say is that I have been working with two colleagues at Harvard on a conflict resolution application of the overview effect. And just it really is applying it, because if you read what the astronauts are saying, they are seeing the big picture in which conflict can be resolved, even though we're very, very different and come from very different cultures. And so it's a unifying vision that still allows for the diversity that really does make up our planet. And your question should have come probably this morning. It's such an important question that we're not doing justice to it, but we are at the end of the day. So I will just leave it there.
Well, I think it is so lucky that both of you, actually, knowing some of Frank's background, had such cosmopolitan education experiences, and it's very much in keeping with O'Neill's vision that you mentioned too. And he imagined deep space habitats housing many Earth cultures, and that it would be easy for them to visit each other as well, with no gravity well to worry about. Well, we do need to wrap this up, so I'm going to bring my slides up. I hope everybody can say thank you to Alyssa and Frank. We can have a round of applause with the Zoom button and your cameras. But really fantastic to hear from both of you. You've dedicated years or decades of both of your lives at very different parts of your lives to this endeavor and to humanity's future in space. So it's fantastic to have you sharing that here and allowing us to record it and share it with others. I also want to thank again my co-hosts. Gitika, thank you so much for running the Young Professional Strand and lining up so many great speakers and being a part of our planning meetings. It's great to have you on this adventure with us. Ron, such a landmark day to have you on the astronaut panel when we've done so many together, where we've hosted other astronauts. Really fantastic to hear your perspective this morning, and to have you hosting all of us here. Anahita, so glad you were able to make it and be here for so much of the day. I mean, especially this final fireside chat, despite the hour in the UK. So speaking of cosmopolitan gatherings, this is a global one, and we're happy to have everybody here. I do want to point you guys, of course, to Frank's book and to Anahita's book, which is a children's book that introduces people to the same ideas and the overview effect. I don't have a slide of it, and I don't have her latest, but I did dig up I always reach for my pile of books here. I do have Alyssa's earlier book with her advice for people that might be interested in being an astronaut at a young age. She has a new one called Ready for Liftoff that I linked in the chat as well. Of course, I also have to share my book. This is explicitly written for educators. It's a little bit more academic volume, and the companion curriculum meant for high school students, but it works for much younger kids that are motivated. But if you go to spaceeducation.org, it'll redirect you there. It's a free and open education resource, not just introduction to space science and history of space exploration, but also why is it important to people on Earth, and what's happening in the new space economy. And it gets into space philosophy, Frank, issues of sustainability and ethics and governance, and avoiding existential threats and so forth. Shepherding Earth life through the solar system and beyond. It's definitely aspirational. If you're interested, I do run an online course on this for explicitly for teachers, but it's fantastic to have enthusiasts and informal educators there too. At arieslearning.com/course walks you through the book and the curriculum. And we're starting a new cohort on the 28th, I believe, right after Thanksgiving. So fantastic timing for you folks if you want to sign up today, and it's deeply discounted right now for you as well. I have to, of course, mention my work with the Aldrin Family Foundation. Several of my teammates presented today. If you're interested in the truly giant maps of the moon or Mars, or any other activities, or a new partnership with Kerbal Space Program, or Twiggs Space Labs, allowing kids to learn electronics and build their own satellites, please reach out anytime. I would love to help you with any of that. That said, another free and open resource for you guys, if you go to spaceeducator.net, that is the Facebook group that we've set up for this event. So there's 100 something people in there already. I hope you guys will join if you haven't already. It's a great place to find space education resources and to share the resources that you have to share. Some of our members are pretty prolific. So spaceeducator.net should redirect you there. Thanks again to all of our partners. I hope I did a good job thanking them at the beginning of this session. So in the interest of time, I will just once again thank everyone who presented and contributed and helped get the word out about this event. And thank you most of all to all of you for showing up and participating and being a part of this. It's been absolutely fantastic to have these discussions with you all day long, and I'm really grateful to everyone who's been a part of this. So Ron, I think you're the one doing the honors on the recording, but this may be a good time to stop, unless Gitika or Anahita or you, Ron, have anything to say.
Well, yeah, one very important thing, Mark Wagner. The amount of work you put into making this happen is enormous, and we all need to thank you for the diligence, the thoroughness, the compassion that you bring to making this happen. You know, it's really extraordinary to me to see all this come together so well again and again. So on behalf of everybody, thank you. So
thank you, Ron. That's really wonderful and touching the way you said it. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would just like to echo the same thing. I think working with all three of you to organize this has been such a huge pleasure. And as a young professional, to have the platform to be able to provide my perspective, as well as bring in some other young professionals to come in and speak, has been such a huge honor. And I can't wait to keep growing this community.
Thanks so much, Gitika.
It's a thrill to be here, everyone. It's 12 o'clock. It's wonderful to see you all. Can't wait to see you at the next online event in 2024. Stay tuned, sign up, and join us, because it's this team, the four of us, it's really a wonderful team. We work hard behind the scenes, and we do it truly, as Ron was saying, because we want to bring something that's inclusive and free and that allows people to connect. And we hope we've achieved that.
Yeah, you have.
Thanks, Anita. And of course, want to thank you and get a cup on my behalf too. Just fabulous working with you. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. I can't speak for the others, but I'm always happy to stick around for a couple of minutes, but probably a good point to end the recording, Ron. And we will up on